I didn't realize they were destroying my life until I heard my own voice saying things I never said, not in real life, not in private, but in a courtroom. The first time I heard it, I froze. "This is her voice," the lawyer said confidently. "She admits everything." And then the recording played. My voice, crying, begging, confessing. I did it. I manipulated the accounts. I lied. The judge leaned forward. The jury stared at me, and my ex-husband, he didn't even try to hide his smile. But here's the thing. That wasn't me. My name is Elena Voss. 3 months ago, I was the CFO of a fast-scaling tech company that had just closed a $120 million round with Sequoia Capital backing. I wore Prada to board meetings, checked numbers on my Apple Inc. MacBook Eto AM, and I built that company's financial system from scratch. Then, overnight, I became a criminal. Financial fraud, data manipulation, breach of fiduciary duty. The headlines hit faster than I could breathe. My accounts were frozen, my reputation gone, and the man leading the charge, my husband, Daniel Voss. He filed for divorce the same week, claimed I had been secretly siphoning money, presented evidence, audio recordings, emails, transaction logs, everything perfectly aligned. Too perfect. At first, I thought I was losing my mind because the evidence was airtight. Even I started doubting myself. Did I forget something? Did someone manipulate me? Was I set up? Then came the first court hearing. And that recording, I remember gripping the edge of the table so hard my fingers went numb. "That's not me," I whispered. But no one listened, because it sounded like me, exactly like me. After the hearing, my lawyer pulled me aside. "You need to prepare yourself," she said carefully. "This is going to be very hard to win." Hard to win? I was about to lose everything. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, empty, silent, cold, the kind of silence that feels like it's watching you. I opened my laptop, scrolled through every file I had, emails, financial logs, backup drives. Nothing, everything matched their narrative. Everything pointed to me, until I saw something small, almost invisible. A timestamp. It was buried deep inside a transaction log export. A minor discrepancy. Ling. 7 seconds. That's it. To anyone else, it meant nothing. But to me, it was wrong. Because I built that system and I knew down to the millisecond how it worked. So I pulled the raw server logs, not the ones they presented in court, the real ones, and that's when I saw it. The pattern, every fraudulent transaction, it was executed while my login was active, but the IP address didn't match. Not just once. Every time, someone had been using my credentials from somewhere else. And suddenly, everything changed. I wasn't the criminal. I was the setup. But here's what terrified me the most. This wasn't sloppy. This wasn't random. This was engineered. Whoever did this knew exactly how I worked, how I thought, how I would defend myself. There was only one person who knew me that well, Daniel. But I didn't react. I didn't confront him. I didn't tell my lawyer. Because in that moment, I realized something far more important. If I exposed this now, they would adjust, they would fix the gaps, they would erase the mistake. So I did the only thing they would never expect. I let them think they were winning. I showed up to the next hearing. Quieter, weaker, less confident. I let my voice shake when I spoke, let my eyes look tired, let them believe the pressure was breaking me. And Daniel, he leaned into it. He got bolder, more aggressive, more careless, exactly what I needed. Because while they were building their case, I was building mine, not to defend myself, but to destroy them. And this time, I wasn't just bringing evidence, I was bringing a recording they didn't know existed. I didn't start fighting back. Not yet. Because the moment you reveal you know the truth, you become the threat, and threats get eliminated. So instead, I became harmless. At the second hearing, I wore something simple. No more Prada, no heels, no sharp confidence, just a plain dress. Minimal makeup. I looked defeated. My lawyer glanced at me. Concerned, "You need to show strength," she whispered. I shook my head slightly. "No." I said, "I need them to think I don't have any." Across the courtroom, Daniel was watching me, carefully, measuring, and then he relaxed. That was the first crack. His lawyer stood up confidently, presented more evidence, transaction trails, email chains, and then another recording. This one was different, shorter, colder. My voice again. I knew what I was doing. It said, "I just didn't think anyone would catch it." The room shifted. Even the judge looked at me differently this time, and I did exactly what they expected. I looked down, silent, still. Inside, I was counting 3 seconds pause. Micro tremor in the audio. Background noise, too clean. Again, but not perfect. Because this time, I noticed something new. There was a faint echo pattern. Almost like it had been processed, not recorded naturally. Generated, and suddenly, a memory hit me. 3 months ago, before everything collapsed, Daniel had insisted we upgrade our internal tools, AI integration. He said, efficiency. He partnered with a startup, some voice modeling company. I didn't question it at the time. Why would I? I trusted him? That was my second mistake. After the hearing, I didn't go home. I went somewhere else. A small co-working space downtown. The kind filled with freelancers, coders, people no one notices. I sat down, opened my Apple Inc. MacBook, and started digging, not into my company, into his. Because Daniel never built anything himself, he always outsourced intelligence. And it didn't take long. The startup had a name, obscure, quiet, no press coverage, but funded by the same investors who backed us, and their product? Voice replication. Not basic, advanced. The kind that could recreate tone, emotion, hesitation, identity. My identity. I leaned back slowly, heart steady, mind racing. So that's how they did it. Not just fake evidence, manufactured reality. And suddenly, I understood the scale of what I was dealing with. This wasn't just a divorce case. This was a controlled takedown. I wasn't supposed to defend myself. I was supposed to collapse. But they made one mistake. They used my voice without knowing what I would recognize. Because when you live inside numbers and systems long enough, you start seeing patterns others miss. And now, I had something they didn't expect. A direction, but suspicion isn't proof. And in court, proof is everything. So I needed more, not logs, not theories, something undeniable, something that could break them in front of everyone. That's when I changed strategy. I stopped looking backward and started setting a trap. The next day, I did something unexpected. I called Daniel. He picked up on the third ring. Elena, he said. Calm. Controlled. Is this about the case? I let my voice crack. Just slightly. I don't want to fight anymore. I said, silence. He didn't expect that. I'm tired. I continued softly. I just want this to end. Another pause. Longer this time. And then I heard it. Not what he said, but how he breathed. Relief. I think that's for the best. He replied, Of course you do. I'll cooperate. I added, Whatever you need. That's when it happened. The third crack, his tone changed. Barely, but enough. Good. He said, That makes things easier. Easier. For who? I swallowed. Let the silence stretch. Can we meet? I asked quietly. Just talk. No lawyers. Another pause. He was thinking, calculating, and he made the mistake I was waiting for. All right, he said. Tomorrow? Said them pay. Perfect. After the call ended, I didn't move for a few seconds. Then slowly, I reached into my bag and took out a device. Small, black, unnoticeable. I placed it on the table and smiled because for the first time since this started, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was controlling the next move. And tomorrow night, Daniel was going to say something he would regret for the rest of his life. This story contains fictionalized elements for entertainment and educational purposes. I got there early. Saddam. Niche. A quiet restaurant. Dim lights. Soft jazz. The kind of place where conversations disappear into the walls. Perfect. I chose a table in the corner. Back to the wall. Full view of the room. Control. Always control. I placed my Apple Inc. iPhone on the table, screen down. Not because I was careless, because the real recording device was already running, hidden, silent, watching. At exactly 7:06, Daniel walked in, still polished, still composed, still wearing that same tailored confidence he never earned. He spotted me instantly and smiled. Not warm, not genuine, victorious. Elena, he said as he sat down. Up close, he looked even calmer than in court. That meant one thing. He thought the outcome was already decided. I didn't think you'd actually come, he added. I gave a small, tired smile. I almost didn't. I'm glad you did, he said. Leaning back slightly, there it was again. That tone, relaxed, too relaxed, like someone who had already won. We ordered drinks, wine for him, water for me. I needed clarity. I've been thinking. I started quietly. He nodded. Listening. Maybe you're right. I continued. Maybe I pushed things too far at work. His eyes flickered. Not surprise. Recognition. And that's when I knew he was waiting for this. You did, he said simply. Not accusing, confirming, like we were agreeing on the same version of reality. The version he created, I hesitated. Lowering my gaze. I don't understand how it got this bad. That's when he leaned forward, closer, and for a split second, his mask slipped. You really don't know? He asked. There it was. Curiosity. Dangerous curiosity. I shook my head slowly, and then he said something he wasn't supposed to say. It wasn't supposed to go this far. Silence. I felt my pulse spike, but my face didn't move. What do you mean? I whispered. He exhaled. leaning back again. I mean, it was just supposed to be clean. Clean. The word echoed in my head. Clean removal. Clean exit. Clean replacement. You were becoming a problem. He continued. 2. Independent. Independent. I almost left. I built that system. I said softly, I know. He replied instantly, too fast. And that's exactly why it had to be you. Silence. Heavy. Thick. There it was. The first piece. Not proof, but truth. I didn't want it to be messy. He added, swirling his wine. But you made it harder than it needed to be? I let my hand tremble slightly. How? I asked. He looked at me for a long second. And then he smiled. That same smile, the one from the courtroom. You really want to know? Careful. This was the edge. One wrong move, and he would shut down, so I nodded. Slowly, and leaned in, just enough. Please. I said, and that's when everything almost fell apart. Because right before he spoke, his eyes shifted. Not to me. Behind me, someone else had entered, and he saw them. I didn't turn around, but I felt it, the shift in the room. Daniel's posture straightened. His tone changed instantly. Back to controlled, back to careful. I think you already know enough. He said calmly. No. 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 He was pulling back. I needed one more push. Just one. So I did something risky. I reached across the table and touched his hand. Unexpected. I trusted you. I said quietly, and this time, it worked. His guard dropped again. Just a little. Trust has nothing to do with it. He muttered. Then, lower, almost under his breath. They needed it to look real. My heart stopped. Not him. They, I repeated gently, and that's when I saw it. The exact moment he realized he had said too much. His fingers tightened around the glass. His eyes snapped back to mine. Sharp, calculating, dangerous. You're asking the wrong questions, he said coldly. The shift was instant. Mask back on. Walls back up. Game over. Or so he thought, because what he didn't know was that every word he just said was already mine. Recorded, stored, secured, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. Because in court, this could still be twisted, still be explained away, still be dismissed. And worse, now he was suspicious. I could feel it. The air had changed. The advantage? So I stood up slowly. I think you're right, I said softly. He watched me carefully, measuring again. About what? He asked. This ending, I replied, and then I walked away, controlled, like I had lost. But the moment I stepped outside, I didn't breathe. I didn't relax. I didn't celebrate because something was wrong. That look he gave behind me, it wasn't random. It wasn't distraction. It was recognition. So I turned slowly and looked back through the glass. And that's when I saw him nod Daniel. Someone else, standing near the bar, watching me, not casually, not curiously, intentionally. And then he lifted his phone slightly, pointing at me, recording. My stomach dropped, because in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't the only one collecting evidence, and whatever game I had just stepped into was much bigger than Daniel. I didn't go home, not after what I saw through that glass, because the moment I realized someone else had been recording me, I understood something far worse than surveillance. They weren't just building a case, they were building a version of me they could control Instead, I kept walking past my car, one block, then another, then another. I crossed once, doubled back, changed pace, cut through light, then shadow, not because I was scared, because if someone was following me, I wanted them to work for it. Because if someone is watching you, they expect predictability, and I wasn't giving them that anymore. I stepped into a late-night cafe, sat by the window, ordered nothing, and waited. 3 minutes later, he appeared, the man from the restaurant. He didn't walk in. He stood outside, across the street, phone in hand, not even hiding it. Like he wanted me to know, like fear was part of the message, too bold. Which meant one thing, he didn't think I understood the game yet. I lowered my gaze and unlocked my iPhone. To anyone watching, I probably looked shaken, distracted, cornered. I was watching him through the reflection in the glass, counting how long he stayed still, how often he touched his ear, how many times he looked away before checking if I was still there, timing his movements, his posture, his attention. And then I saw it. An earpiece. Small. Almost invisible. He wasn't alone. Which meant Daniel wasn't the top of this. He was only the husband I could see. Of course he wasn't. No one builds something this precise. Alone. I stood up slowly, grabbed my bag, and walked out the back exit. Not running. Never running. Because running confirms fear, and fear gives them control. For the next 48 hours, I disappeared. No calls. No messages. No routine. I stopped sleeping in the same place twice. I stopped using anything they could predict. Even silence started to feel like a location. Even my lawyer couldn't reach me. Because for the first time since this started, I stopped reacting and started hunting. I began with the startup, the voice AI company Daniel partnered with. The company's website looked polished in the most suspicious way possible. No team photos, no usable names, no real demo, no history anyone could verify. It wasn't a company built to be seen. It was a company built to survive discovery, just vague language. Next, generation voice modeling. Ethical AI applications. Ethical, I almost smiled. So I went deeper. So I went past the public layer and into the records they assumed no one would bother to read. Then I found the first name that actually mattered. Not Daniel. Not the shell company. An investor with real weight, real access, someone linked to Andreessen Horowitz. And the moment I saw it, my entire understanding of the case changed. This wasn't revenge. Revenge is personal. This was infrastructure. My pulse slowed because now this made sense. This wasn't about removing me. This was about replacing me. At scale, a test case, if they could prove that identity could be rewritten, voice, behavior, credibility, they didn't just win a case, they changed the rules. And I was the prototype. I leaned back in my chair. For a moment, everything went quiet. Then I started building my counterattack. Not in court. Not yet. In their system, inside it was the original financial architecture I built before Daniel ever touched it. I compared it to the version used in court. It didn't take long. The differences weren't random. They were surgical. Tiny pieces of code had been inserted in exactly the places needed to reroute money and keep the visible logs clean. Not sabotage. Design. Inside it was the original financial architecture I built. Clean, untouched. Before Daniel ever optimized it, I compared it line by line with what was presented in court, and that's when I saw it. The code had been altered in tiny, surgical places just enough to redirect money while leaving the visible system looking clean. Enough to reroute transactions while keeping logs clean. And that was the moment their elegance broke. Because underneath all that polished fraud, they had left a scar, a time-stamped change made after my last authorized update, small enough to hide from a judge. Not from me. After my last authorized update, and not just altered, weaponized. For the first time, I had something real, something dangerous. But I didn't send it to my lawyer, not yet. Because evidence alone doesn't win, timing does. So instead, I did something else. Something they would never expect. I didn't touch the main system. That would have told them I was still alive in the architecture. Instead, I went somewhere quieter. A secondary mirror environment they should have shut down but didn't. The kind of mistake arrogant people make when they think the person they framed is already finished. And then I left them a bruise they couldn't see. A signal buried so quietly it looked like nothing. But if they touched that system again, it would tell me exactly where the hand came from. If they touched the system again, I would know, and more importantly, I would know from where. Then I waited. And they didn't disappoint 12 hours later. They took the bait, the signal moved, accessed, triggered, confirmed, someone on their side had reached back into the system and handed me exactly what I needed. From an IP address not listed anywhere in their official infrastructure. I traced it, step by step, layer by layer. I traced it layer by layer until the route ended somewhere it should never have ended. A law firm. Daniel's law firm. I stared at the screen for a full second without breathing. Because once legal touches the fraud, this isn't damage control anymore. It's architecture. I stared at the screen. Slowly, everything aligned. Legal, investor, all connected. And suddenly, I understood the real plan. This wasn't just a case. It was a coordinated narrative, built to be believed. And suddenly, I understood why every piece of evidence had felt so perfect. It had never been built to survive truth, only scrutiny. And for the first time since this started, they made a mistake. They moved too soon, because now I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was mapping them, and the more I mapped, the more cracks I saw. The deeper I mapped it, the uglier it got overlapping access. Impossible timing. People appearing in the same chain who had no legitimate reason to ever be there. They were rushing, and rushing leads to errors. Errors. I closed my laptop slowly, exhaled, and for the first time, I smiled, because they still thought they were tracking a frightened woman trying not to drown. They still thought I was reacting. What they didn't understand was this. The moment they touched that mirror system, they stopped hunting me. They entered my map. And once I could see the map, I didn't need to run anymore. I only needed to decide where to cut first. The first sign wasn't obvious. It never is. It started with something small. My bank account, locked, no warning, no notification, just access denied. I frowned, tried again. Same result. Then my email logged out. Then my cloud storage. Then everything not hacked. Revoked, like I never owned it in the first place. That's when I understood They weren't just watching anymore. They were cleaning. I stood up so fast. The chair scraped across the floor. Laptop open, offline backup, still safe. But everything else? Burned. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I didn't answer. It rang again. And again. Persistent, controlled. So I picked up. Silence. Then, a voice. Too calm. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Not Daniel. Different. Older. Powerful. I said nothing. You had your chance in court? He continued. This doesn't need to escalate. Escalate. I almost smiled. You altered financial records. I said quietly. I have proof. Silence. Then, a soft chuckle. No. He said, you had proof. My stomach dropped. I turned, ran to my laptop, opened the offline drive. Still there, still intact. But when I tried to open the files, error, corrupted, all of them, onabewan, years of work, version history, timestamps. I froze. Not panic, worse, stillness. Because this wasn't random, they knew about the backup. How? I whispered. You're very good. The voice said, but not as invisible as you think. My mind raced. The cafe, the man, the signal I left, the mirror system, they didn't just access it, they traced it back to me. And now, they were erasing everything. You should stop, the voice said softly, before this becomes irreversible. Threat. Clear. I closed my eyes, and then I did something they didn't expect. I laughed. Not loud, not hysterical, quiet, controlled, because they made one mistake. Just one. They thought I only had one copy. I reached into my bag and pulled out something old, not sleek, not modern, a small external device, disconnected, untouched. From before Daniel ever had access, my real archive, the one I never digitized fully because I never trusted cloud systems, and inside it was everything. Raw logs, original voice captures, even early test recordings, including one file I had forgotten existed. A private meeting between Daniel and someone else. I plugged it in, opened the file, and pressed play. She doesn't know how deep this goes, Daniel's voice said. Another voice replied, we don't need her to. Silence. Then, if she fights, Daniel asked. A pause? Then the answer came, we bury her. My hands went still, because that voice, I recognized it. Not from memory, from the case file, the lead attorney, on my own legal team. Everything stopped. The room, the air, my thoughts, because in that moment, I understood something worse than betrayal. I understood the structure. There was no side. There was only them, and I had been surrounded from the beginning. My phone buzzed again. Same number. I answered, you're running out of time. The voice said, no. I replied quietly, you are. Silence. And then I did it. I triggered the one thing. I had been saving, not evidence. Not yet. A failsafe. The signal I left in their system, it wasn't just tracking, it was a trigger. If my access was cut, if my data was tampered with, it would activate automatically. And now, it had, across multiple endpoints, fragments of their internal logs were already being copied. Slowly, quietly, to a place they couldn't reach. They thought they erased me. But what they actually did was force my hand. And now, there was no going back. I looked at the screen, watched the transfer bar move, and then everything went black. Laptop shut down. Power cut. Not accidental. Outside, I heard it. A car door. Footsteps. Coming closer. Deliberate. They weren't just deleting evidence anymore. They were coming to finish it. I didn't move. Didn't panic. Didn't run. Because if they were here, it meant one thing. They were already too late. The power didn't come back, but I didn't need it. Because the transfer was already complete. I sat in the dark, laptop dead, room silent, footsteps outside, closer. And then my phone vibrated, one message from an unknown number. Transfer complete. I didn't smile, didn't react. Because this wasn't victory, this was ignition. The next move had to be perfect, not emotional, not reactive, strategic. Because once I did this, there was no taking it back. I turned on my Apple Ink, iPhone, battery, 12%. Enough. I opened a private account, one I had never used, never connected, no name, no history, invisible. And then I uploaded the first file, not everything, just enough, the recording, Daniel's voice. It was supposed to be clean. Then, the second clip, we don't need her to know. Pause. We bury her. No explanation. No context. Just truth. And then, I posted it, not to a news outlet. Too slow, not to my lawyer. Too compromised. I dropped it where it spreads fastest. Public. Within minutes, nothing happened. Silence. Then, the first share. Then 10. Then 50. And then, everything exploded. Comment? Reposts. Threads. People analyzing the voices. Matching tones. Comparing speech patterns. Is this real? Wait, this sounds like, no way. And then, someone tagged the company. Then, someone else tagged the law firm. And then, someone recognized the voice. The attorney, the one standing beside me in court, that's when the shift happened. Not online. In the system. Because within 30 minutes, my phone rang. Daniel, I didn't answer. He called again. And again. Then, a message. What did you do? I typed one word, nothing, and sent it. Because technically, I hadn't done anything. I had just told the truth. But they were already collapsing. I could see it. Emails flooding in, missed calls, numbers I didn't recognize, and then something even better. The company's website went offline, no announcement, no explanation. Just, that's when I knew they were panicking. Because companies don't disappear unless they're trying to hide something. Then came the message I was waiting for. From my lawyer, a different number, a different tone. Call me. Now, I didn't, not yet, because I wanted to see how far this would go. And it went further than I expected. Within hours, clips of the recording were everywhere. People slowed them down, enhanced them, layered them, and then someone did something dangerous. They found the full name behind the second voice, not just the attorney, but the firm, the investor, the connections. Threads started linking everything exactly the way I had mapped it, only faster, louder, uncontrolled. That's when it stopped being my case and became their nightmare. My phone rang again, unknown number. I answered this time, you need to take that down. Not calm anymore. Tight, controlled panic. No, I said, "You don't understand what you've started." He snapped. I looked at the screen, watched the shares climb, watched the comments multiply, watched their world fracture. "No," I replied quietly. "You don't understand what you built." Silence. And then he hung up. He sat back, exhaled slowly. For the first time, they were reacting to me, not the other way around. But I wasn't done because what I released was only the beginning. I still had everything else. And now, the world was watching, waiting for the rest. I didn't announce I was coming. I let them do it for me. By the time I arrived, the building was already surrounded. Not by police. By attention, cameras, phones, whispers. The kind of crowd that doesn't show up unless something is about to break. The law firm had called an internal review. Closed door. Private. Controlled. But after the leak, nothing was controlled anymore. I stepped out of the car. No rush. No hesitation. Just presence. And for the first time, no one looked at me like I was guilty. They looked at me like I was the answer. Inside, the room was already full. Long table, glass walls, city skyline behind them. Daniel was there. Of course he was. Suit perfect, expression controlled, but his eyes, variant, not calm anymore, sharp, restless, afraid. Next to him, the attorney, the same man who told me to stay quiet, now whispering into someone else's ear. And at the head of the table sat the man behind it all, the investor, the one who never needed to speak until everything started falling apart. The room quieted. The moment I walked in, not dramatic, not forced, just inevitable. "Elena?" The attorney said quickly, standing up, "You shouldn't be here." I didn't stop walking, didn't answer, just took a seat. Across from them, equal, higher, "You've already done enough damage." Daniel added, "Damage." I almost smiled. "Have I?" I said calmly. The investor finally spoke. "Let's not turn this into a spectacle." "Too late." "You altered evidence?" I said, "Silence." "You fabricated financial logs?" I continued. No one interrupted. "You coordinated with legal counsel to present false testimony." A shift in the room. Small, but real. "That's a serious accusation," the attorney said. I nodded. "It is." And then I placed my phone on the table, screen up. This time, no hiding. I pressed play. It was supposed to be clean. Daniel's voice filled the room. Clear, undeniable. Then, the second clip, "We bury her." The room froze. No movement, no sound, just truth. I looked at Daniel. He didn't speak, couldn't. I turned to the attorney, his face finally cracked, then to the investor, still composed, but slower, calculating. "That's not context," the attorney said quickly. "That's edited." Of course, I expected that, so I did something they didn't. I smiled, and then I slid a small drive across the table. "Full recording," I said, uncut. The room didn't move. No one reached for it, because they already knew if they touched it, everything ended. "You don't want to do this." Daniel finally said, his voice, lower now, not confident, desperate, "You already did." I replied. Silence again. Longer this time. Heavier. And then, the moment happened. The one they couldn't control, because someone in the room stood up, not me, not them, a junior partner, shaking slightly. I reviewed the logs this morning." she said. Her voice cracked. They were altered. Everything shifted, not slowly. Instantly, the attorney turned. Sit down, he snapped. But it was too late. Because once truth enters a room, it doesn't leave quietly. I have copies, she added, and timestamps. Daniel leaned back, like something inside him just gave out. The investor didn't speak. He didn't need to, because for the first time since I walked in, he wasn't looking at me like a woman he could contain. He was looking at Daniel like a liability, and in rooms like this, that was worse than guilt. That was abandonment. I stood up slowly. No rush, no emotion, just control. You tried to erase me. I said, but you forgot one thing. I looked around the room at every face, every witness, every crack in their system. I built this. Daniel stood up too fast. Elena. His voice cracked on my name. Not with anger. Not even with control. With panic. Real panic. Because he finally understood what everyone else in that room had already seen. This wasn't a scandal he could spin. It was the end of the version of him that people respected. I looked at him once, just once, and said, sit down. Daniel? He did. Not because I raised my voice, because for the first time, he knew he had none left. Then I turned and walked out. No one stopped me. No one defended him. No one even looked at him the way they had when I walked in. By the time the elevator doors closed, Daniel wasn't a husband, wasn't an executive, wasn't even the man who had tried to destroy me. He was just the man left sitting there. After the room learned who he really was, this story contains fictionalized elements for entertainment and educational purposes. I didn't go back to court. I didn't need to. Because after that day, the system handled it for me. The law firm issued a statement, carefully worded, internal discrepancies, procedural oversight, not lies, but not truth either. It didn't matter, because people had already seen enough. Clients started pulling out quietly, then publicly, one by one, names disappeared from their portfolio. And then partners started leaving no dramatic. Not loud, just Daniel didn't speak again. Not to me. Not to anyone publicly. But I heard things, the kind of things people only say when they think no one is listening. He lost his position, then his reputation, then the thing men like him protect more than either of those, the illusion that they are untouchable. Because once people stop believing the version you sold them, you have to live with the one you really are. The investor, he disappeared fastest. No statements, no defense. Just distance, the kind of distance money buys instantly. And the company was gone within a week. Servers wiped, website never came back. Like it never existed. But it did. And enough people remembered. My lawyer tried to call again. This time, I answered, I didn't know. He said immediately. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he did. It didn't matter anymore. I'm withdrawing from the case. He added. Of course he was. I already won. I replied, and ended the call. Days passed. Then weeks. And slowly, everything went quiet again. No headlines. No noise. Just absence. The kind of silence that only comes after something collapses completely. I went back to work. Not the same office. Not the same system. Something smaller, cleaner, no investors, no hidden layers, just code and control. One afternoon, I sat alone, reviewing a new build, sunlight through the window, coffee untouched, peaceful, My Apple Inc. iPhone buzzed. Unknown number. I stared at it for a moment, then picked up silence, and then a voice. Daniel, not confident anymore. Not polished. Not dangerous. Just empty. I didn't think you'd answer, he said. I said nothing. For a second, all I could hear was breathing, uneven, and like even silence felt different now that no one was standing beside him. I need to ask you something, he said at last. I leaned back in my chair, looked out at the city. Bright, moving, uninterrupted. Why didn't you release the rest? He asked. Not, why didn't you destroy me? Not, why didn't you expose everything? Why didn't you release the rest? Because that was who he was even now. Still thinking in leverage, still thinking in damage, still thinking the worst thing in the world was what could be made public. I almost smiled. You still don't understand. I said, silence. Then, quieter. Then, make me understand. I let the pause stretch. Not for drama, for precision, because this was the first honest thing he had asked me in a very long time. If I had released everything, I said, people would have talked about the scandal. I looked down at the code on my screen, the clean architecture, the new system, but this? I continued softly. This made them see you. He didn't speak. So I did. I could have destroyed your career in one night. Daniel. Another pause, but what I took from you was bigger than that. His breathing changed, tighter now, controlled too late. I stood up and walked to the window, watched my reflection over the glass. I took away the version of you that worked on other people. Silence. Then finally, a whisper. What does that mean? It meant he knew. He just needed to hear me say it. It means, I said, that from now on, every room you walk into will know. I let that land. They'll know what your voice sounds like when you lie. Another breath, sharp this time. They'll know what your face looks like when you panic. I closed my eyes for a second and then gave him the line he would remember for the rest of his life. And worst of all, they'll know you needed me to look powerful. Nothing on the other end. Not even breath. Just the kind of silence that only comes when something has gone all the way through. When he finally spoke again, his voice was smaller than I had ever heard it. I'm sorry. I looked out over the city one last time. Not to forgive him. Not to punish him. Just to tell the truth one final time. I know, I said, but now you have to live long enough to hear who you are from people who used to admire you. And I hung up. I placed the phone down. Then I went back to work. Not because I was cold. Not because I had forgotten, but because the most satisfying part of all of it was how ordinary my life felt without them in it. No courtroom, no lies. No one rewriting my voice. Just peace. And in the end, that was the part they never planned for. They thought winning meant taking everything from me. What they never understood was that the moment the truth came out, I didn't need revenge to be louder. I just needed it to last longer than their lies. That was the moment I stopped being the woman they could control. And they never controlled anything the same way again.